Wendy specializes in sea lion diet, population assessments, and more recently, sea lion entanglement in fishing gear and marine debris. So she's also involved in grey whale and humpback whale monitoring programs, which we're going to hear more of today. And Wendy will be joined by Brian from Subtidal Adventures. So Brian knows a lot about the Pacific Rim National Park. In fact, he has over 40 years of working knowledge of the area. And Brian was actually the brains behind the Pacific Rim Whale Festival. So that's why we're really excited to have him here today. So we're going to be hearing both from Wendy and Brian, and I'm just going to hand it over to them right away.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Szaniszlo, and I'm a marine mammal ecologist with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And I'm going to be presenting on some sea lion diet work that I've been doing with DFO. And prior to joining DFO, while I was doing what I was doing as a research associate with the Vancouver Aquarium. And then I'll be speaking a little bit about gray whales. And I just want to mention, I'm really happy that Brian Congdon is able to join us. In the past, during Whale Fest, we usually did marine mammal research days together, and we would go out on the boat and actually look at whales and sea lions out there at this time of year. But unfortunately, due to the COVID situation, we're doing things a little bit differently. I've been working with Brian since probably the year 2000 when I started doing work on gray whales and sea lions as well. And we've continued that working relationship on some of this monitoring since that time. So it's great to have him here. I'm going to start off talking about some work I've been doing on the diet of Steller sea lions in Barkley and Clayoquot Sounds. But before we jump into the diet work, I did want to introduce you to some of the pinniped species that we have here, just so that you know the species we're talking about. Here in BC, we have both seals and sea lions, 5 different species. And we're going to be talking about sea lions today. So bottom right corner, I don't know if you see my cursor, but the Steller sea lions, and I'm going to mention California sea lions as well. Sea lions can be differentiated from seals by some of their characteristics, including their really large front flippers. Their front flippers are very large. They're able to rotate those flippers underneath themselves. So they're able to essentially prop themselves up, and they are quite mobile on land. Seals, on the other hand, have very small front flippers. And another differentiation or difference is that they have tiny little ear flaps on their sides. Sorry, they don't have ear flaps. They have tiny little holes for ears on the sides of their heads, whereas sea lions do have little ear flaps. Steller sea lions are going to be the focus today, and they are the largest of the eared seal family here in BC. There are approximately 40 to 48,000 of them. And in Canada, they are listed as a species of special concern under the Species at Risk Act. They're quite large. The males get to be about 3 meters in length and weigh about 1,000 kilograms. The males are significantly larger than the females. Females only get to 2 to 2.4 meters in length and weigh 200 to 300 kilograms. There are 2 populations of Steller sea lions recognized on the West Coast, the eastern and western populations. The animals that we have here in Canada are part of the eastern population, which extends from southern Alaska up to, southern California up to southeast Alaska. There are about 7 rookeries in British Columbia. If you look at the map with the red dots, those red dots are the rookeries in BC. The top red dot is Forester Island. That's actually in southeast Alaska. And these rookeries are specifically the places where sea lions go to breed and have their young. There are sea lions hauled out at different locations up and down the coast, but these are known as haul-outs. They don't breed or have their young there. California sea lions, as well in BC, they're much smaller than Steller sea lions. Males are still quite large. They're about 2 meters long and weigh up to 400 kilograms, much larger than the females, which are smaller, weighing only about 110 kilograms and about 1 to 8 meters long. California sea lions are known for their noisy barking. They're quite playful, incredibly intelligent, and here in Ucluelet and many other areas along the coast, they're known for hanging around on docks. Their range is from the southern tip of Baja, Mexico, up to Vancouver Island. And as far as we know now, only the males disperse as far north as British Columbia. Having said that, some females have been seen in Washington State, just to the south of us. So we might see some females showing up here in the future. In terms of their population, there's about 250,000 in the Eastern Pacific. This is survey work that's done by the United States. We don't know exactly what the population here is in British Columbia. There have been some winter surveys done by Fisheries and Oceans in the past, but there have been at least two fall surveys. You'll see in that bottom graph there where the number of California sea lions were incredibly high. So because of that, DFO just started doing some California aerial surveys starting this past fall, and we're doing them monthly through the month of March to do an updated population assessment for British Columbia. How we're doing that, it's all done by plane. We do aerial surveys. We charter Louis from West Coast Wild out here from Ucluelet, and we fly every single haul out along Vancouver Island. So for the Steller sea lion surveys, we fly the entire coast, but for the California sea lions, we're starting just with Vancouver Island for now, knowing that that is the major extent of their range. As of right now, they are listed as, or I should say they're not listed under the Species at Risk Act. So going to the diet study now, this was some work that I started back in 2015. And the objective was to look at the seasonal diet of Steller sea lions in Clackwood and Barkley Sounds using 1 year-round haul out. So I chose Long Beach haul out or Long Beach Rocks as a haul out to use for my index site. And this is because it's a known year-round haul out, and it's relatively easy to access from either Ucluelet or Tofino. Later on, I hope to take the work further to compare the Steller sea lion diet to the fall diet of California sea lions, and also compare these results with the diets of Steller sea lions along the southeast and northeast coasts of Vancouver Island. There's some diet work that we're doing with Fisheries and Oceans Canada right now in those locations. So to ensure that my results are comparable, I use the same methods. So why even scoop poop in the first place? Sea lions are recognized as indicators of fish abundance and indicators of ecosystem health. Seasonally available prey species that are abundant and densely aggregated during the non-breeding season are important for Steller sea lions. The increasing number of Steller and California sea lions has raised some concerns regarding impacts on fisheries. So this was my main reason for wanting to do this work, to look at diet outside of the summer breeding season. What we don't know about diet of sea lions, at least up until the past few years, is what they're eating during the spring, fall, and winter. And in the management plan for Steller sea lions, trying to identify this non-breeding diet and understanding it has been listed as a priority. And the results from this work will help increase our knowledge regarding the potential for fisheries competition for prey resources. So methods, how is this work done? Scat, or the sea lion poop, was collected once per season at Long Beach Rocks over a span of 2 years. 40 scats per site were required. And it's not a very high-tech job to do when you're collecting. The scats are collected with wooden spoons, and they are placed in Ziploc bags, then frozen, transported to the lab. Now, this is something that's not really shown in any of the scientific presentations, but this is the best way I can describe what we see when we're on the haul out collecting the scat. The scat comes in all various consistencies and colors. This is what it looks like. I wish I could share with you what it smells like, but I can't. It's a unique, strong smell for sure. For the analysis, we're looking at the DNA to figure out the type of species that are found in the scat. And we're also analyzing the hard parts as well. So for the hard parts analysis, the samples are washed, and the hard parts that remain are shipped away for identification. Okay, now I need you to brace yourself because I'm going to throw a lot of graphs at you. It was really complex trying to look at the results from all this data, especially for the 2 years. And since this is not a scientific presentation, and I'm really wanting to make this understandable to a lot of people, I'm going to choose to show a lot of more simplified graphs than a few what I find to be a bit more complicated ones. So what I'd like you to look at these the graphs here is the blue bars. So those blue bars are the prey family or the prey group. So for example, at the top we have salmon, next blue bar is rockfish, below that other, then gadids, forage fish, flatfish, and then cephalopods being octopus and squid. Under the blue bars are the specific species of that prey group. The only percentage that I have kept for a specific species is for Chinook. And that is because there has been a lot of interest around Chinook and interest specifically in how much both sea lions and seals are foraging on Chinook. So here, first of all, we have the results of the first summer at Long Beach. In 2015, you'll see that salmon was quite high up on the diet list, with Chinook only coming in at about 6%. And then you'll see a variety of other species that have been eaten. So flatfish was quite common, as well as the other grouping. Next, we move to fall. You'll see that salmon is still quite high, with most of the salmon being eaten being chum. Chinook salmon, you'll notice, is at only 0.1%. We're also seeing a lot of flatfish being eaten here, and forage fish. Forage fish being fish like herring. Now winter. Winter, you can see there's quite a difference here as well too. Salmon has significantly dropped off. Gadids such as Pacific cod has really increased in the diet, and forage fish is high on the diet list as well too. Then we move to spring, and gadids are still quite high. The other grouping is quite high, and flatfish as well. So you'll see going through these the seasons here, and here they all are. Top left is summer, fall over on the top right, bottom left winter, bottom right is spring. This is a quick visual of the diversity of the diet in the first year of this study. You'll see it's very different from season to season. I know that's a lot to take in, so just take a little breather here, get back to the fun of what the science is all about. When we collect the scat, we usually have a big bag full of the samples. We've been really lucky to have a lot of volunteers come out over the years and help me collect. We've had Strawberry Isle Research, the Euclid Aquarium, and Parks Canada has been a huge help in collecting the scat, as has the Vancouver Aquarium staff. Okay, now we're going to be going back to some more graphs, and this is actually just hot off the press. I only got these numbers about 2 weeks ago, so this is really new to me as well. It's been really exciting to see what these results are. So back to summer, just like the first year, salmon is quite high on the menu. Chinook salmon comes in at 7.6%. Forage fish and flatfish are also important during the summertime. In the fall, salmon falls off again. A lot of diversity within the other component, and rockfish for the first time is quite high. Then we go to winter. This was quite a big change here, with Pacific cod taking up most of the diet. and then into spring. Again, you could see the changes here. Salmon once again being a little bit more important, as well as flatfish and the other grouping. So this is year 2 as a snapshot. Again, top left is summer, top right is fall, bottom left is winter, bottom right is spring. So takeaway message here again is the diet is very diverse and changes quite significantly from season to season. Okay, another little breather here because I'm going to show you one more set of graphs and then I promise that that is all over. Comparing first year to second year. We've got year 1 results on the top, year 2 on the bottom. I know, again, there's a lot of different prey groups and species here. So again, if you focus on the blue bars, that will probably make the results pop out to you a little bit more. Takeaway message, again, is that their diet is very diverse and changes from not only from season to season, but across years as well, too. And although I'm not showing it here, what I'll add is that we do have some results back from the Steller sea lion diets on the east coast of Vancouver Island. And the results are similar in that the diet is different over the seasons. However, the diet here on the west coast of Vancouver Island is more diverse than that on the east side of the island. So just to sum up, sea lions eat a variety of types of fish and prey. Marine ecosystems are incredibly complex, and other animals also compete with seals and sea lions for prey, such as whales and seabirds and other marine fish. And other animals also depend on pinnipeds for food, particularly the transient killer whales. And factors other than predation can also affect fish abundance, including fishing, habitat quality, and climate. So a large number of people to thank for the sea lion work that I've been involved with, primarily Fisheries and Oceans Canada that supported all of the analysis for all the scat work, which was incredibly expensive, to the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust for funding the for my involvement in the work, Parks Canada, Vancouver Aquarium, the Marine Mammal Lab, Subtidal Adventures, Strawberry Isle Marine Research Society, and Ucluelet Aquarium all played a big role in helping with the scat collection. So rather than taking questions now, I'm going to move right into talking a little bit about gray whale work that I've been involved with. And I think we're going to be taking questions at the end. I don't want to take away from Brian's time. So an introduction to gray whales. Gray whales are a baleen whale. They don't have teeth like killer whales or dolphins or porpoises. They have like a big filter that hangs from the roof of their mouth, and they use that to filter the food from the water and sediment. They are quite a mottled gray in color. They're considered a medium-sized whale. They get to be up to about 14 meters long and weigh about 35,000 kilograms. The calves nurse for about 7 to 9 months, and that's a fair bit shorter than a lot of other whale species. The calves usually leave their mothers by September. So if you're out on the water, this is more what you would see if you're looking at gray whales. Again, you can see that they've got quite a gray mottled color. They do not have a dorsal fin. If you look at the bottom left, I don't think you, oh yeah, you do see my cursor, okay, good. You see that they're mottled gray in color, and they also have knuckle-like ridges down their back. This one is quite smooth. It's not a great example, but that's another way you can identify the gray whales. They've got a characteristic heart-shaped blow. They also have a lot of barnacles and lice on them as well. Most gray whales will migrate north from the lagoons in Baja, Mexico, all the way up to the Bering and Chukchi Seas. This swim or migration is about 9,000 kilometers long. They pass West Coast Vancouver Island. Here we are, West Coast Vancouver Island, around this time of year, March through April. and they migrate quite close to shore when they're migrating up north. And on their southward migration in October, they're usually a little bit further offshore. For feeding, gray whales have really interesting feeding behavior. They feed a lot on or near the bottom. If you see them feeding when you're out on the water, this is typically what you'll see. A lot of times they're kind of rolled on their side. They go to the bottom and they're really working the bottom, either trying to suck up the little mysid shrimp or tiny amphipods. Brian and I were actually out yesterday, and we saw a lot of them feeding in shallow waters that were water was, I want to say about 10 to 12 feet deep. So we see their pectoral fins sticking up from the water because the water is so shallow. So this is what is on the gray whale menu. They feed on mysids. That's a tiny little shrimp-like critter that lives in areas where the bottom is very rocky, usually a lot of kelp in that type of habitat. They also feed on amphipods, which are found in sandy bottom environments. And usually during June, they also feed on porcelain crab larvae. And the porcelain crab larvae is one of their prey because if you see these long, big spikes, this species of crab larvae just happens to have spikes long enough that it'll get caught in the gray whale's baleen. Another food item that's quite important to gray whales at this time of year is the herring eggs. The herring spawn happened just over a week ago here, and a number of animals have moved into Barkley Sound. There were about 8 out here yesterday that were feeding, and I heard yesterday that there are about 50 gray whales feeding up in Heshkuyat, also due to the herring spawn. So current status for gray whales here in BC, under the Species at Risk Act, they are currently listed as a species of special concern. There's a population of about 20,580. This is an updated number and quite less than the near 27,000 animals from the last count. And this is partly due to an unusual mortality event that's going on, and I'll touch on that a little bit later on. COSEWIC, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, does recommend that the Eastern North Pacific population be designated as 2 separate distinct units. One being the Northern Pacific migratory population, and COSEWIC recommends that they be considered not at risk. And this is the group that migrates all the way to the Bering and Chukchi Seas. COSEWIC recommends, however, that the other distinct unit be the Pacific Coast Feeding Group, and they're recommending an endangered status listing for this. There are approximately 243 individuals. There's also a Western Pacific population, but I'm not going to touch on those today. The Pacific Coast Feeding Group is a group of whales that we see from California, Northern California to Southeast Alaska. These are some of the whales that, for whatever reason, choose not to make the full migration up north. They've probably found that there is enough food and diverse food for them to stay in our area here. There are approximately 243 individuals. That's the latest count that I'm aware of. And this is known from doing photo identification work on the animals and matching the photos and figuring out the number of unique individuals. There is some genetic variation from the rest of the population, and these Pacific Coast Feeding Group animals show very strong site fidelity to their feeding grounds. In fact, when Brian and I were out yesterday, I recognized some of the gray whales from previous years, and there's 2 of them that I'm sure were here last March during the herring spawn as well. So it's always exciting to see who comes back. So the monitoring work that I've been involved with started back in 2005 as an inventory, trying to figure out how many gray whales use Pacific Rim National Park Reserve and the surrounding waters during the summertime. And I continued that monitoring until the present day. So Pacific Rim National Park Reserve is on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and it's composed of 3 units. We've got Long Beach up here, the Broken Group Islands, and then the West Coast Trail. My study area was generally from Long Beach Rocks, so this is where the sea lions were, down to Cape Beale. But I did have the opportunity to do some work up in Clayoquot Sound, and not this past season, but the season before, I was lucky enough to do some survey work with Parks Canada, and we went down the West Coast Trail. So the methods for the photo identification was doing annual surveys during June to September, and the method is taking photographs of the side of the gray whale. Ideally, we try to get both the left and right flank, but the convention is to get the left flank. If you look at these 2 photos of these gray whales here, you'll notice that the markings and blotches are quite different. As well, the shape and spacing between the knuckle-like ridges are different. So by taking many photographs and matching them together, you're able to identify unique individuals. So the results I've got from 2005 through actually 2018. I don't have the results for 2019 or 2020 quite yet. Quite a few sightings over the years. In recent years, there have been far less gray whales in Barkley Sound than previously. I think the most I ever saw was in 2005, the year I started. And at that time, there were at least 41 individual gray whales that were identified. And it's just been interesting to see which animals return year after year and which ones are seen down the West Coast Trail. So over the span of the study, I had 1,201 gray whale sightings, and the matching, which was a huge undertaking, was done by Cascadia Research Collective. So a huge shout out to Ali Perez and Cascadia Research Collective for analyzing all this data over the years. And this has provided valuable information to see the number of animals that are using the park. Very important feeding habitat in this area. So what does all this mean for management or for conservation or to help these whales out? Photo ID provides an assessment of the number of individuals that are using our local waters. It helps identify the individual whales that are feeding here in Barkley and Clayoquot Sounds. And from that, it helps us identify hot spots where the animals are feeding. As well, the information on the number and the distribution of whales helps us protect whales and their habitat. For example, by creating regulations or viewing guidelines to try to minimize boat disturbance from gray whales and other marine mammals as well. I also want to touch on the unusual mortality event. This has been going on since 2019. An unusual mortality event is, it involves a significant die-off of any marine mammal population. And in the US, under the US Marine Mammal Protection Act, it demands an immediate response. A lot of gray whales have been stranding since 2019, as well as not just in the US, but also in Mexico and Canada, with a total of 418 animals to date. I'm not sure how many of those are part of the Pacific Coast feeding group. And we're not sure exactly why they are dying. We have noticed, or I should say the experts involved with this have noticed that a lot of the stranded gray whales seem very emaciated or skinny. So this could be due to a number of factors. One thought is that they're not getting enough food in the Arctic feeding grounds. Some health assessments have been done over the past few years using drones. These images here are from some biologists in I think in Washington State that are taking drone footage of gray whales to assess their body condition. The two bottom photos are gray whales that I took in 2019. And it might not be too obvious, but even from this, the side profile of the whale, you can see that these animals are quite skinny. There's a bit of a, oops, just moved my camera there. There's a bit of a divot just behind the head of the whale, and that sort of shows that it is quite skinny. You don't see it in these photos, but you can see their vertebrae are quite pronounced as well. So in addition to the UME event that is going on, gray whales and other marine mammals are facing a number of threats, including getting entangled in fishing gear. They're susceptible to vessel strikes, particularly gray whales, because they are so close to shore, and that's where a lot of smaller vessel activity happens. Industrial development, habitat degradation, and marine debris. And although these are all negative things, we all can play a positive role and do what we can. For example, if we see an entangled whale, we can report that to Fisheries and Oceans Canada. There is a reporting line, and with marine debris, we can choose to try to minimize our use of single-use plastics. A lot of people, probably far more than I have listed here, have been involved and supported this gray whale work since I started back in 2005. But I really wanted to point out Cascadia Research Collective, which played a huge role in analyzing the data, and to Brian Congdon, who has been supporting a lot of, probably most of these surveys actually. So a huge thanks to Brian as well. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up here and happy to turn it over to Brian.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, you're on, Brian.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks, Wendy. That was great. My presentation is not nearly as slick as yours, but I'll see what I can do. I'm going to share my screen here. Welcome the opportunity to be here, because for many years I've been doing whale watching and boating back and forth, and been very interested in the whales. Just a minute here, share. Okay. You may notice the background on my photo that it's pretty green in color. I'm going to show you one here. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep, you can see it.
Okay, very good. So here's, Wendy mentioned the food the whales go after in the spring is the herring roe. This is what it looks like right after a spawn, immediately after a spawn. This is the herring milt, essentially the male sperm, which is released, and it turns the water green like this. And the spawn Wendy mentioned that happened last week ran for probably a 5 mile, maybe a 5 mile stretch of shoreline on the western shore of Barkley Sound. And there were a couple of whales in there waiting early on, even as late as late February, or as early as late February, but not finding anything to eat. And then when the spawn happened, then there became maybe 7 or 8 whales in there. And as of yesterday, today I was up there, and there was 4 whales. So it's winding down. I believe the food supply is dwindling, so the whales will move on to the next thing. One of the last photos that Wendy showed on her presentation was the one that we affectionately call Admiral. And as you see me scrolling through here, Admiral was first, didn't have those scars on there in the beginning, of course. That's caused from a collision with a boat. And so these big scars, there's actually 4 of them, obviously caused by the boat propeller. Admiral was first photographed down in Washington State in 1990, and it didn't have the scars then. And apparently it was photographed right near a place called Admiral Rock, hence the name Admiral. I first photographed her, I believe it was in 1994, and I don't have a picture of that, but here's one in 2008, and you can see the scars. Somebody asked a question on the chat about whether the markings on the body changes from time to or throughout their life, and it certainly does to a certain extent, but there's new scars. The coloration of the skin changes a little bit, and so it fades, it gets worse, it gets better. You may notice in here a bunch of barnacles gathered in that scar. There might be another photo later here I'll show you that shows no barnacles. You'll also notice in another photo more white in this area here, and then sometimes less white. I'm going to show you, Wendy mentioned the left side and the right side. This is the left side of this whale. And one of the reasons I like this whale so much is that she is so easy to identify by those scars. And we quite often see her every spring in the area we were this morning. Sometimes we don't see her, and I've recently figured out or learned that the years that we do not see her in the spring, it could be because that's the year she has a calf. The whales migrating up come without, the calves come a little bit later. March and April, they're going by our coast, but it's not till around May and then into June that we might see calves, but we don't always see them. This photo here is the other side of Admiral. So obviously a lot different, and I might see this whale off in the distance and not even realize who it is because, you know, it's just got that one little mark, couple little marks there. So I'm going to scroll through a couple more photos here of, oh, here's a really good one. She arched her back pretty good in this photo here. So you can see all four scars clearly, virtually no barnacles in the scars here. So it makes this one is a very easy whale to spot. I want to show you this here. This is a photo of Admiral in 2011, in June, I believe it is, in July 2011. And this is Admiral's baby. I'm sure she's had more babies than this one, but this is the first one I was able to see. And she had that baby around for about a month, I believe. By the end of July, I think the baby wasn't with mom anymore. But I did see it the next year, but I haven't seen it since. I'm going to, Wendy had a picture of this whale here. It's not the Admiral, she had a picture of this whale here. And I noticed on Wendy's photo, there's a little mark right there on the photo. So this one we used to call dinner plate because of this white patch here. About the size of a dinner plate, we think. Sometimes our naming of these whales is not very imaginative. But the mark that was up here was actually GPS transmitter. So they were tracking this whale. This was several years ago that I witnessed the GPS tracker on that whale. One more photo of Admiral. And you can see it appears to be a lot more white on the skin. It does seem to come and go a little bit from year to year. Certainly there's a lot of it this year. I'm going to get rid of some of these. And going to show you a gray whale. I think the one that Wendy was talking about that she definitely recognized from, there it is, from other years. And I've been looking through my photos recently and realized that I see it quite often, actually. So this photo is a 2009 photo. And let's see if I can make that a little bit, moving over there a little bit and get this one from down here, which is a couple of days ago. And you can see the similarities. For example, you may not see it right away because it does look slightly different, but some of the definite, sometimes a different angle that the photo is taken, whether the whale is pointing away from you a little bit or towards you. This is the right side of this whale, but there's this mark here, matches that mark. This mark here with the lighter colored thing in front. There it is right there. And then see how the whitish, this photo here is not as crisp and clear as I would like, but anyway, the whitest part is bigger right there, and you can see that same thing there. See this little white streak sticking out there and there. So that's proof positive that that's the same whale. I saw it this year. I've seen it most years up in the spring feeding area on the herring spawn. So that's it for gray whales. I'm going to move, I got to get out of here and go find another. Just give me a moment here. Get rid of that. I'm going to talk about this whale here. This one we've named Pinky. It's a humpback whale. And this whale is my friend too. I first photographed this one in 2006. There's that. It's not coming up for me. Maybe, well, there we go. Black and white. Well, it looks black and white anyway, but I want you to notice this little white patch on the right side of the underside of the fluke, and then this one here on the left side, okay? And I'm going to, just let me move these right over here. See if I can do this. Okay. Whoops. I'll show you another one. The same mark, somewhat better photo. Show you another one. I can show you another one from 2010. Same thing. There and there. And let's move up. Another way to identify whales, humpback whales, we usually use the underside of the tail flukes, because there's almost always some markings there of some kind, either white patches or scratches. The other thing we can do though is use the serrated edge here. If we don't have any markings at all, or the quality of the photograph is such that it's too dark and you can't see any of the markings, then you can use the arrangement of all these little notches here. So that's one thing. The other thing too, though, many humpbacks have markings on the body. It's not always as obvious as it is on gray whales. However, on the dorsal fin here, this is Pinky. You'll see these scars right there. So sometimes she's not diving deep and we don't see the underside of the flukes. So we can still identify an individual by other marks, and this one, we use those scars. There's another whale that we've been seeing quite regularly that we are now calling Crop. That's a humpback whale that unfortunately had a collision with a boat a couple of years ago. And it has a bunch of scar marks all in this area here and back down here. And then it went on the other side of the body, a great big, huge mark, something like that. It doesn't seem to be bothered by other boats in the area since it had its collision, but it's pretty awful to see, that's for sure. I'm going to show you, you may be wondering, well, why do you call that whale pinky? The underside of the whale where those ventral slits are, it's all folded up nice and neat and tidy for swimming to be streamlined. But when the whale feeds, and they're feeding on mostly schooling fish, the skin on this particular whale happens to be pink. Now, I'm sure there's more whales with pink skin there, but we have this one that comes in quite black, actually, all throughout, and then quite white all throughout. But she has pink skin there. Now, you might be wondering why I'm referring to her as her, and that would be because in 2012, Pinky showed up with a calf. Didn't know it was a female, but now we know. And that calf was with her all spring, from about the beginning of July, right through till about November, feeding around in Barkley Sound that year, 2012. Now, if you recall, I pointed out the marks on the underside of the fluke there for being pinky. And of course, this is her calf that was with her the whole time. And I'm going to show you another picture of just the calf, which we can see some identifying features here. We got these two little nicks here, a spot there, and this thing here. And then later on, I'm not sure if I'll be able to show it to you, but later on, there's going to show up here a couple of what look like dollar size circular marks. Let's see if it's in this one. Well, not really, but we've still got the same marks there, mark there. So this calf was such a pleasure to have. And of course, when we have a resident humpback whale with a calf, we often wonder, well, is it going to come back next year? The date on this photo is 2020. I saw her the very next year. So she came first in 2012 with her mother. She came back independent of her mother in 2013 in late May, early June, and was around for a couple of weeks. And then I never saw it again. I don't know what the sex is of the calf, but I never saw it again until last year. And I did see it in the area. I was pretty excited about that, to see a whale that I recognize. I wasn't sure at first. I had to double check my photos and go back. I was very pleased to see that it was in fact the same whale. I hope I got that already. Oh, that's the 2020 whale. Okay, sorry. I'll put that beside this one. Those two little marks there. The two little marks there, that one there, that one there. So it's the same whale. There's a new mark, or a new little mark there. I don't see it on this one. So they do get new scars and scratches, which makes it a little bit of a challenge sometimes. And there might be, oh, I want to point out one more little thing. Oh, here's one thing that when I'm taking photographs, I like to sort of show the two whales together, and then I did crop to this one a little bit. So this is actually Pinky in 2016, April 2016, which I thought was pretty early. And I believe that is a calf as well, but I only saw it that one day and never again. And I don't recall that I've ever seen that individual whale in the area that year. But again, we see the markings identifying Pinky. And it's a pretty unique little mark. It was pretty hard to get, with only the one opportunity I had to get that whale. I don't know where it is now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm going to show you one more thing. I mentioned the body marks around the dorsal fin for identifying individual humpbacks sometimes. There's two things that Pinky has unique as well. If I see it, say the whale is coming towards me and I only see the top side of it, I've learned to recognize it as Pinky by these little things here. Those are actually holes. I don't know how they got there, but they're there. So I can recognize her that way as well. I think that's all I've got. I'll get rid of all this stuff and we can open it up for questions. Ooh, only got 6 more minutes. Guess I took longer than I thought I was going to. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Brian. That was really interesting.
Thank you.
So we can open it up now to questions. So if anybody wants to raise their hand, I will turn on the mic, or I can see Wendy's already been answering some questions in the chat. So I will just go through. I know somebody was asking what Pinky's calf is called, and does she have like the catalog code?
I see that question now. I don't know the answer to that question. She probably does, because Mark Sawyer, who's going to be doing a presentation on this sort of thing tomorrow evening, he was asking me a whole bunch of questions about Pinky's calf last spring. Actually, he was asking me about that. So he may have some information on that. Okay.
And there is a question from Laurie. It says, can you describe how they feed on the herring spawn? I get, this could be both for both the humpbacks and the gray whales. And how do they, gray whales, how do they target the mysid shrimp?
I'll talk a minute about the gray whales feeding on the herring spawn. The herring usually, well, not always, but deposit the eggs in the eelgrass, and I'm sure, and it also gets deposited on other seaweed as well. I also believe it just lays there on the bottom, but the eelgrass method is they'll just put their mouth over top of the blades of eelgrass and scrape off the eggs. Of course, leaving maybe, I don't know, 10 centimeters of eelgrass that they can't access because of the shape of their mouth. So there is no way that the gray whales would ever eat all the herring eggs. I guess that's somebody's grand scheme of protecting the food source. But if they also will eat off just directly off the bottom, like Wendy was mentioning earlier, I believe they'll also roll onto their side and scoop up the sediment off the bottom and get the eggs that way as well. I'll move over to humpbacks for a minute. They don't eat the herring eggs, but we actually are getting humpbacks now in the herring spawn area, and we never used to. And we never used to get humpbacks actually really close in until about 2000. But over the last maybe 6 or 7 years, we've been getting a couple of humpbacks coming in, and they're feeding on the actual herring, not the herring eggs. So we get them in for a short time this time of the year, and then they go away and feed somewhere else. The humpback whales are mostly, when we see them in Barkley Sound, are mostly feeding on small schooling fish. So they started out originally being coming into the sound to feed on the pilchards or sardines. There was also a pretty active whale hunting back in the old days up until maybe the 40s when the last one was taken out of Barkley Sound. But also the pilchard fishery was pretty strong in those days as well, and it collapsed about the same time. So it took a long time for the humpback numbers to build up and then start coming back into Barkley Sound. So the numbers increased. It was just the odd one around 2000 and increased a little at a time. And now we expect to see humpback whales every day in the summertime, which is quite nice because the gray whales move around different feeding spots, and maybe Wendy can talk about that. Wendy.
Was there I think there was a mysid related question. Could you please repeat that?
Yes, they were asking about the skim feeding and how do they target the mysid shrimp?
How do they target them? Well,
Yes.
The mysid shrimp are usually found in rocky bottom habitats, and so there's usually a lot of kelp around as well too. The mysids are in quite densely packed patches, so they seek out the patches and they'll swim through those. These are not in the bottom. It's not like within the sediment. It's off the bottom or in the water column. So they swim through that. And the mysid shrimp get stuck in their baleen. They use that as a filter. So when they squeeze their tongue to the roof of their mouth, it squirts up the water. The mysids remain in their baleen, and that's what they feed. It's not, to the best of my knowledge, it's not known how they actually locate the patches of prey or the mysids. Gray whales and other baleen whales are thought or believed to not have echolocation like killer whales or dolphins or porpoises. So it's thought that they might be using active or passive listening to find the mysid patches and a lot of searching.
Great, thank you. And there's been a couple of questions about Admiral. So Lynette was asking if we have seen Admiral this year. Brian, maybe you'll be able to answer that. And John was also asking if you've seen the drone footage from 2017, where you can ID Admiral in the video.
Well, the short answer to the first question is no, we have not seen Admiral this year. But there was only a handful of whales there this year, so maybe she's somewhere else. Maybe she's up in Heskowit. There's, like Wendy was saying, about 50 of them up there. Or maybe she's got a calf this year. She had a second calf apparently, well, not apparently, she did in 2014. And I didn't even see her that year at all. She never came in the spring, and she spent her whole summer down along the bottom end of the West Coast Trail section of the park. The drone footage, I can't remember if I've seen it or not. I'd love to look at it again. But if Admiral is on her 3-year pregnancy cycle, then 2017 would also make sense for her to have a calf. And I wasn't out much last year. I can't remember if I think I do have a photo of her from 2020, so no calf last year. But no, I may be able to identify Admiral from the air, but I have to look at the video again.
All right, thank you. And we've got a question. Can the migrating killers be a problem for the baby grays and humpbacks?
I could take that one for the gray whales. Yes, they the killer whales can definitely be a threat to the migrating gray whales, and they do target the calves. So there's actually a few locations along the migration route. I know there's one up. I can't remember the name of the passage offhand. It begins with a U, and it's up in Alaska. And there's one location where the gray whales actually have to cross over a narrow but very deep exposed area. And it's known that the killer whales will actually congregate in that area and ambush the gray whales and the calves there. So and I believe there's one spot down in California as well. So don't quote me on this, but yes, the killer whales, or the transient marine mammal eating killer whales, will target the gray whale calves.
There was a second part there about the humpbacks. I don't know if they're, I'm pretty sure the same situation. the killer whales will take advantage of whatever they can. It was interesting though, today on my trip, there actually were some killer whales in the area, and there's no whale calves in the area, but there was a couple of small humpback whales up there today. Not calves, but maybe yearlings or 2-year-olds or something like that. I don't know for sure. They were very hard to watch. I couldn't get a good look at them. But there were killer whales that went through, a group of about 6, and they were no more than a mile away from the whales. So they were probably going to go after seals or sea lions somewhere.
Okay, and Alana's, I think Alana, Wendy did answer the question in the chat, but maybe we'll just touch on that again so everybody else can hear it, is that for the unusual mortality events, you don't know which population the individuals are from. So for example, how many are from the Pacific Coast feeding group? Why is this? Is it possible to get genetic data, or do you need good photo ID before the whale starts to deteriorate and the whales are not in good enough condition during necrocy?
So just to answer that, or to go on what I mentioned there in the chat, I should have clarified that I personally don't know how many of the individuals have died are from the Pacific Coast feeding group, and that information might be available. The easiest and quickest way to get that information or to make that ID is likely from actually taking a photograph of the stranded individual. Unfortunately, for researchers and a lot of people involved in stranding responses, a lot of marine mammals, including gray whales, strand in remote areas, and a lot of them, the carcasses even sink. So it's hard to get to a carcass in time to be able to get an ID. The skin does decompose very quickly. A lot of Pacific Coast feeding group gray whales have been biopsied, so genetic material is available. So getting a sample and getting a genetic analysis done might help answer that question, but I personally just don't know how many of the individuals that have died are from the Pacific Coast feeding group. I think you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. Are the humpbacks we see in Johnson Strait and on the inside the same whales migrating north?
Brian, did you want to take that one since you were talking about humpbacks?
Sure. What was the question again?
Are the humpbacks we see in Johnson Strait and on the inside the same whales migrating north?
I don't know. I would presume well, we see some of the same individual humpbacks year after year. And so I presume they don't go all the way. The humpbacks don't go all the way to Alaska, the same Alaska waters that the grays go to. Grays go to the Bering Sea and the Chukchi Sea, whereas the humpbacks that go north go to that panhandle, Southeast Alaska panhandle, and they're feeding on, again, mostly schooling fish up there. Whereas the grays are feeding on the krill, little shrimp-like creatures that are in the Chukchi Sea and the Bering Sea. So the humpbacks, we talked about the migration of the gray whales from Mexico to Alaska waters. The humpbacks that we get here may go to Mexico, or they may go to Hawaii for the winter, where they breed and have their calves. And most of them go to Alaska waters to feed, but not all of them. So I also heard from people on the other side of the island, for example, that see the same individuals year after year now that they are seeing humpbacks, and they never used to see humpbacks. So we're seeing the same one. So like Wendy was saying, there is quite a bit of site fidelity, and it's quite exciting to go to an area first, the first trip in the season to an area that you're hoping to find humpback whales, and there's a humpback whale, and lo and behold, it's Pinky. It's just like seeing an old friend. One year I was out with Wendy, we were doing some work with sea lions, and it was the middle of December 13th. And we went up to an area near Bamfield that we had been seeing humpback whales over the summer. And there was a spout there, and we checked it out. It turned out it was Pinky. And I actually couldn't believe that she was still there in December. So I don't know what was up with that. Obviously, she did not go away to get pregnant. But anyway, it's just interesting. So, and I have read that at least there are occasions where a humpback may be seen in Mexico and in Hawaii in the same winter season, and then come up to our coast or maybe Alaska. I don't know for sure, but yeah, we see the same one. So they don't go all the way to Alaska. Not all of them. There's more than 20,000 of them in the North Pacific. No, I guess maybe it's about the same. But there's maybe 100,000 in the whole world. So there's no problem with them right now. Remarkable recovery.
Thank you, Brian. And does anybody else have any more questions? It seems that we might be done. Okay, well, Brian or Wendy, is there anything else you'd like to add? If people want to learn more about your research, Wendy, where can they go to get more information?
Good question. Most of the work I'm doing right now is with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. This 2-year study that I was presenting on today, that's something that I hope to probably give at least another presentation locally, at least locally. So I'm not really sure how to answer that. I guess I could. I'm not sure the best way if I could like leave my contact information or something.
Okay. And Brian, sorry, were you going to add something?
I was going to say just one thing. Many people on the boat when we're out on whale watching trips, I've been doing this for 40 years now. So they ask me, oh, you still enjoy it? You know, and I say, well, you know what? I do still enjoy getting out on the boat. But the fact that I am a citizen scientist, I suppose, you know, I do the photography. Yes, I want some nice photos for myself, but I'm also as much as possible, I try to get some ID photos, and then I do submit them to the whale researchers to help the whale research as far as resighting of individuals. And so that keeps me interested in all my trips that I do. So it's a lot of fun still.
And if I may, I just wanted to add to that to say how incredibly important that is. Like, for example, just yesterday, Brian and I were both out looking at the gray whales during the herring spawn, and we were both trying to get some IDs. And I had heard that there was a tagged individual, an animal that was tagged by a fellow with NOAA down in Seattle. And the last location was Barkley Sound. So I was looking for this particular whale. Brian saw another whale that looked like it had a bit of a mark on it. And when we shared our photos yesterday evening, we actually realized that it was the same individual, just different sides of it. We had the tag. So both of us were able to send the information to this individual, and he was really grateful for it. So a lot of times it's very limited for researchers and biologists to be out on the water. So we definitely benefit greatly from folks like Brian who are out there and see something and photograph something and are able to pass it on. It's incredibly valuable.
Thank you.